A really good afternoon, everyone, here at West One, and of course those of you joining us from around the state. My name's Deborah Lunt. I work at the Centre for Training Excellence at Central Institute of Technology, and this is my colleague, Karen Barber, who works in the Adult Migrant Education Program at Central. Karen, really thanks again for joining me this afternoon to talk about your really interesting project, Linguistic Mindfulness. To get things started today, I thought it might be interesting just to explore what linguistic mindfulness means to you, because we see and hear a lot about mindfulness and being mindful in the 21st century. What's your definition of linguistic mindfulness?
Well, we know mindfulness has grown up with psychology, and Buddhists use mindfulness, and we hear it all the time. But I thought, why not use mindfulness to use for language learners and for teaching? So mindfulness, as far as linguistic mindfulness is that at any point in time you're aware of the language that's in front of you. So whether you be at the doctor's or Centrelink or on the bus, that you have a mind to just pay attention to the language that's just in front of you.
Great. So how did the concept of linguistic mindfulness evolve?
Well, it started in 2012. I teach with the Adult Migrant English Program, the AMEP, and that is a federally funded program, and it is for people who come to Australia as refugees and migrants. It's a settlement program to help people learn the language and settle into Australia. And at the time, I worked for Central Institute of Technology, but I was working in the community at Mirrabooka. And I had mixed level classes, as you often do in community classes, and I had students that were very intensively getting settled into the life, going to Centrelink, health problems, taking their kids to school. They weren't really able to do any homework, and like I said, it was mixed levels. So I wanted to see how I could help them to become learners, you know, that they don't do a lot of homework. They had a lot of time taken up with family responsibilities, financial commitments, settling into their life here. So really, I thought mindfulness, if they could be mindful of the language in front of them, then that would be a useful tool for them to learn.
That sounds fantastic. Perhaps before we start looking at the linguistic mindfulness as a strategy, who were some of the people you researched, or what sort of reading did you do in this space?
Well, one of the ways you learn language is to have a rich, comprehensible input. So you want a lot of language variety, but you want that input to be comprehensible. So that's one of the things we need to learn language. It helps if we have a teacher, but you don't actually need, a teacher is just a desirable of learning a language. So what you need is you need that language input. Other things you need is the input doesn't have to be a lot. So it's not the quantity of input that's important, it's the quality. And if you look around at the kind of text we see, they're very pithy. They're easy to remember. I mean, who doesn't remember if it's not on, it's not on? And, you know, things like that where they're short and sweet and they're memorable. This is what you need for language learning. So I thought, well, exploit these texts, these incidental texts we see in the course of our daily lives as a strategy for learning.
Wonderful.
And certainly theorists would also say, if you have this kind of language, students are actually choosing what language they're going to be mindful of and what not. So they soon learn that they could develop independent learning strategies and learning how to learn skills. But also, too, it's a very democratic process. The student is actually deciding, I want to be mindful of this text, not that text.
Wonderful. So look, for those of us who do want to actually pick up on some of that research, everyone will have an opportunity to get the slideshow afterwards, and you've written down there some of the key researchers in the area. So there are the steps. Can you take us through how is it done? How is linguistic mindfulness played out?
Well, in the beginning, as any learning how to learn strategy, I teach the students how to use it. So, I mean, in the classroom, I'm sitting down pretending I'm on the bus, and I'm showing them, if you decide to be mindful on the bus, this is what happens, this is what it looks like. Okay, so you're sitting on the bus, you see just in front of you a sign. Maybe it might be mobile phone usage on the bus, maybe it might be about tagging on. And then they learn, well, what do I do with that? Now, in 2012, I asked my students to use their mobile phone, but the students in the community didn't have mobiles. So they had a language collection book, which they could write. So there was a choice. They could use a mobile phone, take a picture, or they could use a language collection book. And then they would use that they would collect that language, and they would review it. They would have 5 questions that they would ask about every text they encountered. And then from that, they would do something with the text. So really it was training them in the mantra of the 5 questions to always ask about the text and then to go through that exercise. And many of the students, they didn't have a phone that could take a picture. They used a language collection book and they wrote about the language they saw.
Now, look, you know, one of the things you've got up here, and I think it's really important, is that you found it to be such an easy way for not just learners, but also teachers to learn about language. Have you found any difference from, say, 2012 to 2015 now? Are more of your learners keen to use technology, i.e. bring their mobile devices along and capture it on their camera?
Yes, absolutely. In 2012, as I mentioned, in the community, many people weren't using their mobiles. They were actually just writing the text in books. 2015, I am teaching in the city, but everyone now has a phone where they can take great pictures, and also they can bring them into class on their phone, and I just have something I can put in the computer, and we can just look at the text there and then. So it certainly has progressed in 3 years.
Excellent. So look, let's just imagine for a moment we're all students in your classroom. You've got the procedure up there for us. Obviously the first step to look at the text and read it again, become mindful of it. You give us your 5 magic WH questions about the text, and just for everyone's convenience and for those of you tuning in around the state, we've got those questions written up just behind me because we're actually going to have a go at doing this ourselves in a moment, which will be a bit of fun. Let's take this text, for example, the tag off. Did you tag off? Do you want to take us through how that might play out if you were actually getting us to work on that did you tag off text in class? So we'll just go back, to the 5 questions first of all.
Okay, so we're remembering the text that the student is on the bus or the train, and it says, did you tag off? So the student having trained in this linguistic mindfulness, they would look at the text and then they would ask the first question, what does the text mean? Now I'm teaching very elementary level students. They wouldn't know tag off until we talked about it in the context of settlement and getting your Smart Writer card. Before I had Certificate 2 and 3, which were probably post-beginner and to intermediate. But so what they do is, did you tag off? They would try to figure out what it meant. Now, very early on in the settlement, they do know all about, they have their Smart Writers, they know it's very important to tag on, they know particularly it's important to tag off. So they would be able to think, well, tag off means I take my Smart Writer and I put it on the machine and I know I'm not going to get charged anymore. So they have that concept and they can understand tag off. They're not going to necessarily find that in a dictionary, tag off. So then what does the text mean? They understand the meaning. And who is the text written for? Well, then they think about all texts are written for an audience. So they start to develop a critical literacy. Who is this written for? Well, it was written for me. Any passenger on the train, any passenger on the bus. Where did you find this text? Well, I found it on the bus. I found it on the train. I found it at the train station. Why was the text written? Well, they really want to remind me. Or I think they wrote it because lots of people forget, and I've forgotten to tag off. And I'm really glad they have that there because, you know, I can remember tag off. I need to tag off.
And I just love this next question you've got here about what does this text say about Australia? Or would you see this text in your country? Why not?
Now, I changed the question a little. They didn't understand what does this text say about Australia. So I changed it to be, when I used it for 10 weeks, you know, would you see this in your country? And the kind of discussion we get about some of the text is amazing. But what does this text say about Australia? Or would you see it in your country? Many students would say no. You know, when we take the bus, we use money. When we take the train, we use money. We don't have any special cards. This is wonderful that we have this card. They would say things like that. And
Great. Now then we get, after you've sort of taken them through the questions, you get them then to notice a little bit closer some of these language items. sentence patterns, tenses, noun phrases. Is that an easy transition for your learners?
No. As any learning has a learned skill, they need training. So I did this over 10 weeks.
Wow.
And they actually figured out what they needed. We would go through with each text what things you can notice. Because in language learning, in order to actually learn language, you have to notice something, maybe notice a structure. Then you have to re-notice it. And then you have to notice it again and again and again. So it's really important that they decide, okay, I have this text. Now, if this is a text that it feels good for them, they say, I'm going to go to the next step. I'm going to notice something about the language in this text. So, for example, did you tag on? They could choose to notice just the vocabulary, tag on, and think about tag on, tag off. They could choose to notice the tense. Did you tag on? And that did, past tense form, is very powerful. And they need to know that questions are very important in learning language and being able to communicate and share information. Right. And also just the past tense marker of did.
Okay, and after they've gone through that, you then get them to do something with the text. Do you want to just share a little bit about that with us?
Again, this is a learner choice. They can just be mindful of text and stop there. They can do the next step. They can be mindful of text and decide, I'm going to actually notice something about this text, the infinitive, the verb, the vocabulary. Then the next step, again, is a student choice. I can choose to actually do something because I know in language learning, my teacher has told me, and I've seen this work. If I do something with this language, then I'll actually remember it. So then they have a choice of doing something with the language. They could imitate a pattern in the language. They could just substitute a word. Did you tag on? Did you tag off? So we're just doing a little substitution. They can use the word in a sentence. There's about 4 activities they can do where they can do something with the text. And again, they're trained in this. What can I do with this text? We learn about this in the classroom, and then they can write it up in their language collection book.
Right. Okay, that sounds great. Now, look, moving towards teachers and linguistic mindfulness, because I just found it such a fabulous way to develop teacher trainees in their grammar when you shared that with me a year or so ago. I think this next slide shows the text that actually inspired you to originally come up with the concept of linguistic mindfulness, Built to Move. Tell us a little bit about what's involved when you first looked at that billboard and you started to be mindful about language. How does it play out for teachers of language?
Well, I have to say, this picture that you saw just a minute ago wasn't very representative. I hope you saw a really buff guy. Yes. And I've been doing this with my students. And I was just driving home from Mirabooka. I was at a traffic light. And the billboard caught my eye, and I thought, nice. And then I thought, built to move, what interesting language. There's a past participle, built to move. And the stoplight was very long, the traffic light. So I'm thinking, what does that mean? Well, it's talking about 2 things. That man is built to move, ooh la la. And built to move is actually talking about the jocks, the underwear. Yeah. And I started thinking, now, this could be a powerful source for professional development, because just stopped at a traffic light as a teacher, I was thinking about the language. I was saying this is a past participle. This is actually the passive voice. And then I started thinking maybe I could use this in my own professional development, because I'm really big on professional development, if it can be incidental. I'm a very busy people. You are very busy people. What can we do to improve our ideas about teaching and language? Well, we can just be linguistically mindful of the text in front of us, at the bus, in the traffic light, wherever we may be. And as well as that, I saw that as teachers, I could develop another set of questions, about this text, so that teachers could feel empowered to learn about language themselves. And it's very non-threatening. You're doing it all yourself. Yeah. And sometimes you're lucky with a great picture. Yeah. But as well, you can actually...
it's on the spot, automatic, isn't it? Let's have a look at those questions. And, they are a little similar to your learners, but of course, then you start getting into, could I use this text in my class as a mentor text? Now, can you just shed a little bit of light on that in terms of how you would use it as a mentor text?
Well, I think sometimes when you do the professional development, you just are linguistically mindful of the text in front of you and it stops there.
Yes.
But with this built to move, I thought, I was teaching in Mariboka in a multi-level class still, and I thought some of these intermediate students could actually analyze this text. So I could use this in my classroom and they could actually talk through what is built. What is built? Well, it's a verb. And so a mentor text is a text that kind of stimulates analysis and discussion about language. And this is really important, especially, you know, we think about Lunt's taxonomy, and we also think about, you know, getting students to do more, being creative and analyzing text. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for my multi-level learners to challenge some of the learners that are at a higher level. Well, what is this? So this could be my mentor text. You know, they might figure out it's just the past participle. They might go into, oh, this is the passive, built to move. What is that talking about?
Yeah, and look, as you already know, the group of teacher trainees I was working with, you know, they had a 4-week crash course on sort of how to teach English to foreign students, and they were feeling a bit insecure about their grammar. And, you know, they went out one morning, took a whole lot of pictures of language, and came back in, and then in small groups, really felt comfortable in sharing what they brought back and could ask all these grammar questions that I know they would not probably have asked me or asked of each other in a sort of a formal classroom setting. So it really got the conversation going for these teacher trainees around aspects of grammar that I think they felt a little bit, you know, threatened with. But look, maybe it's time to have our audience participate in a text. Maybe we should use the learner questions for this text. The text is, we look forward to seeing you. Can everyone see that okay? I hope that's coming through clearly for the people around the state. Yeah, it is okay. Chris is giving me a heads up, thank you. So we look forward to seeing you, and underneath the very small print, visit perthcity.com, of course. And it was the promo from Lisa Scaffidi's Perth City. What we thought might be fun is for you with your partner to, using those questions, explore that text at your tables for a moment. And those of you that are joining us from around the state, perhaps you could just have a pen and paper, or perhaps give Chris some of your suggestions. That'd be really great to have your call-outs as well. And we'll give you just a couple of minutes now to have a discussion at your tables using the learner questions on We Look Forward to Seeing You. In terms of who was the text written for, we've had initially, well, the tourist, but my colleague Vivian Scott has also mentioned for her, a person who, you know, is just working out where to shop for Christmas or getting to know Perth that little bit more intimately. Fantastic. Let's cross back to Chris, if I may. Where would one find this text?
A couple of people said bus shelter in instances. They've also seen it in paper. Okay,
thank you. Anything else to add from the floor on where we might find the text? No? On TV, yes. I'm sorry? And social media as well. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that. So why was the text written? Let's cross to the floor here again. What have we got on that question?
People looking to reinvigorate themselves as a place to go.
Oh.
Instead of everybody shopping outside the city, come back to the city because we've got something special to offer.
Great. So this idea of reinvigoration for the city of Perth, and it could be argued it has indeed been a very successful campaign in that way. Can I cross to Chris again in terms of rationale for why the text was written?
To encourage people to attend events or to encourage them back to the city.
Excellent. So I've got similar ideas there. And I'm really always curious on this cultural question. What did we have to say on the floor here in terms of what this might say to us about Australia or indeed Western Australia?
Lucas explains how, unlike most other cities around the world, people don't live in Perth.
Right.
It's really, you go to work and you go home. You don't live there, so no one is actually there. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas, so this is bringing people in, and now you can live a bit closer in like West Perth and that part of stuff, but that has not been Australia's way of living.
Right, so for people around the state, you know, indeed Perth is just getting used to this notion of living in the heart of the city. That's actually a very pertinent point. Can I cross back over to Chris again in terms of what the rest of the state is saying in what this text might say for Australia or about WA?
There's a couple of comments here. I think expectation that people can read and understand English.
Ah.
And also the assumption that people have mobile technology to get on the internet.
Yes. Yes. Okay, that was fantastic. Yeah, really great. So, of course, back to the next stage, you would then, after that discussion with your learners, go into noticing the text a bit more closely.
Absolutely, and actually doing something with the text. We look forward to seeing you. I mean, that's a very powerful pattern. We look forward to Christmas. We look forward to something, so they can actually use that as a substitute.
Right.
We look forward to helping you. We look forward to many things. It's a very useful kind of text to have a pattern to actually notice and then do something with it and imitate it.
Great. I am very conscious of time. I do want to certainly allow some time for Q&A because I think there will be questions, Karen. So perhaps to start concluding our discussion, what impact have you seen on your learners? And what's been the feedback from colleagues? So let's go to the learners first. What's been the, sort of the reaction there, the impact?
I think with any learning to learn strategy, it's a student choice. I feel my responsibility as a teacher is to give them the skills to actually choose, yes, I can use that, or yes, I can't. So after a 10-week term of doing this, I would say I had 7 out of 14 very enthusiastic students. Every week they would give me their language collection journal. Every week they would have a page written about this little text and, answering the questions. And these were elementary, post-elementary students.
Wow.
So they were engaged. But it didn't click with everyone. And it's the same with teachers. Some teachers just love it. And, I love it because it's incidental. I can just do it on the road. I also love it. And other teachers have said they liked it because it's my choice. I can decide what I want to do. It's very non-threatening. I can explore this language and this grammar and I might not know. With 2 or 3 people, as Deb said, or even on my own, go back to home and use my, grammar dictionary. And I can actually learn myself about this. So I think it's very empowering for teachers. And I'd say some colleagues took it up just because it was so quick and easy.
Well, it just strikes me as a really great model for 21st century teaching and learning in terms of this idea of choice and also this idea of learning for both the teacher and the student. Look, for those of us that are really interested in trialling this out, what tips have you got in terms of a couple of steps that you could take us through to get the thing going in our own classroom?
Well, it does take a bit of discipline. You have to say, every week I'm going to just do this strategy and I'm going to teach my students how to do it. And it has to be where they learn these 5 WH questions and then they learn what to do with it. But I do think training them just an hour a week. And part of that training is getting together with the text in a group and having the discussion just like you did. And it was very engaging for the students. And they could soon see that they were learning a lot through this. And some of it was misconceptions, that they were learning from. I mean, we see that Save Water Wisely poster with a frog. I mean, my students said, we're not going to drink that water. It's dirty. There's a frog on it. So, I mean, just this critical literacy and the fact that sometimes pictures do not communicate what people expect them to picture, to communicate. So, I mean, there's lots of learning going on as far as language, but also as far as cultural competence.
Great.
So, yeah.
And this slide kind of sums up, I think, your thoughts on linguistic mindfulness as a learning strategy. Is that for you the most powerful message that it does indeed give us a real choice?
Absolutely. It's a choice. We can decide to use this method or not, and it's an exciting choice.
Great. Yes. Now, for those of us who haven't read your study, where can we find your paper, Linguistic Mindfulness?
Yes. It's a 2012 TESOL in context paper, but all you need to do is Google search Linguistic Mindfulness, and it'll be the first thing that comes up, the paper, and it's downloadable.
Great.
Yeah. And it's written in teacher speak, so. it's it's comprehensible input, very important.
Wonderful. Well, Karen, really on behalf of the Centre for Training Excellence at Central Institute of Technology, I really want to thank you for coming along and sharing what is indeed a really amazing project. Thanks very much. And perhaps on that note, we do have a bit of time left for questions. 15 minutes. Thanks. Let's first of all go to the floor, and I'll try and repeat the question.
Yes. Karen, do you know of any broader application outside of language class?
So do we know of any broader application outside of the language classroom?
Well, I coined the term linguistic mindfulness, and it was specifically for language learning. So as far as people using in the classroom for other purposes, I can see that it's possible, but I haven't heard of anything yet.
Our colleague Marion Marick has just suggested that it may indeed, the case of bringing text into a classroom, be a wonderful springboard to get conversations going and realising that there are different perspectives and different texts and, you know, the intercultural meanings attached to that. Thanks very much, Marion.
Because you look for industry-specific terms and should use them correctly, like you've probably seen that movie where they go on the line. Are you putting it on the line? You know, and just the grammar of it makes it sound bad, and it makes you sound like you don't know what you're saying. But if you know, in your industry, whatever it is, you would want to use the word so it makes you sound like you know what you're saying.
What a wonderful idea, you know, using it for industry-specific language. Great suggestion. Viv.
Advertising students, getting them to look at some ads and asking those questions would really help them understand which shows that way. And maybe it wasn't useful, like for all people who doesn't to everybody.
Advertising students, of course, being able to look at these text types and the very varied range of advertisements that are available in the 21st century.
It is a developing critical literacy, and whether it be advertising students to just check, you know, what is this making me do? And as you said about, you know, developing a means of having communication and, you know, deciding about ideas and disagreeing and agreeing. I mean, that's such a useful kind of strategy. So I'm glad you asked that question, Maureen Haig, because you talked about other applications, and I do think what are we about as humans? We're about communicating and thinking of ways of communicating and thinking about ways of repairing miscommunication and having a deep understanding of each other and where we're coming from. So, you know, it's just opened me up to really, there are lots of places where we could be linguistically mindful, whether it be a warmer in our classroom or whether it be for, you know, different occupations, and drawing attention to language. I think anytime we draw attention to language in its use is very, very powerful.
What I particularly love too, Karen, was this whole idea of, you know, bringing your own device, the way you've been able to integrate technology into this, and it takes me back to what Mark Miller was saying this morning, you know, in terms of really thinking about how everybody can incorporate technology into their classrooms. And I know sometimes, is it not the case that in language classes, particularly sometimes with people new to Australia, with limited language skills, they're a little bit tentative sometimes with using technology. And I think you know, has it been the case, well, I think you've said from 2012 to 2015, there's been a lot more students now wanting to do that and being quite excited about that trip out in the morning to collect their items of language.
Yes, absolutely. And I think Mark Miller was talking about, I think 2012, I was ahead of my students. In 2015, I'm behind, and Mark Miller says, that's okay. The students know what they're doing. You don't have to be, you know, so they'll quickly hook up their phones and get everything going. And that's really great, because, you know, I only use technology if I think it's going to enhance and do something that I can't do. And so that's pretty exciting.
So let's just not flip the classroom, but we'll flip the PD model and have students give us the PD on technology, perhaps.
Absolutely, amen to that, I think, do we have time for another question? Because you were going to ask a question, Maureen?
Yeah, I was just interested, you said about 50% of the learners took it up. So I just wondered if that shifted at all, or if it was just okay because you exercised your choice, so it was just okay that 50% liked it or did it.
So interesting question where you're wondering if why was it just 50% and are there more now opting for it? Honestly, I would say no. And I'm a bit of a control freak teacher, and I would actually like to make them do this. But the whole idea of this was student choice. I mean, and even the text they chose. You know, I had students choosing text like doggy dumpage unit. I mean, have you seen the doggy dumpage unit in the council? I mean, it's a huge text. This is elementary level. At the end, she thought we were putting dead dogs in it. So, you know, she wrote a whole page about this. And, I mean, it is, and some people were choosing washing labels. So I kept trying to remind myself, Karen, this is about student choice, you know, and I can't inflict it on them. And I do think students, maybe a year from now, some students will take it up. They've been trained in it. I feel like I've done my job. I've trained them in how to do it. They know exactly how to do it. And perhaps in time, you know, maybe when their language gets better, maybe we're in that space of being mindful and they're not so much worried about their settlement issues, they might take it up. So I guess I don't know if I've seen any greater numbers. Yeah.
But what an amazing independent learning strategy. Yeah, fantastic. Karen, thanks again for your time, and thanks everyone here at West One, and also those of you that have joined us from around the state. Many thanks.
Authorised by the Government of Western Australia, Perth.